How can you not like Ghostbusters? It's a brilliantly funny film with an astonishing cast that is timeless in its presentation. It's as relevant today as it was when it was first released 35 years ago.
To have a fascination with ghost stories and then to see up on film people that looked like scientists throwing themselves into haunted environments, I genuinely at the age of 13 pointed at the screen and said, that's what I want to do.
So I was watching Ghostbusters hand in hand with hearing about people's real world claims of ghosts. The two didn't match up. In Ghostbusters you've got these extravagant ghosts flying about in electric chairs or made of balls of slime and eating food and things like that. And yet in the real world they're described as just other people.
Hi, I'm Steve Parsons. I'm a British ghost hunter. I've been investigating ghosts, haunted houses and the paranormal for over 45 years. Yes, I am an ordinary ghost hunter, but yes, there is an academic side to what I do. I'm currently most of the way through a PhD that's looking at sound and its relationship to paranormal experiences. I've written a number of books. I've written countless journal articles, magazine articles, and have been on innumerable radio and television shows. There is an academic side to what I do, but I guess at heart, prior to the movie, I was a ghost hunter. It's a title I still use, but I also don't mind being called a Ghostbuster. A few years ago, the Wall Street Journal sent one of their reporters to spend some time with me, several days with me out here in West Wales in the UK. The resulting article that was published in the Halloween edition, they labelled me the gold standard of ghost hunting. Now obviously that made me feel somewhat confused because I didn't know why I deserved the title. I was just an ordinary ghost investigator who strove to do things to a high standard and to find the best quality evidence. I think my first memories of Ghostbusters was encountering posters on bus stops. This ghost with a "do not proceed," a red bar through it, certainly was intriguing and gained my attention. Now I'd been conducting my own investigations as a ghost hunter for a number of years prior to the movie coming out, but of course this popped straight up on my radar. This got my attention, and like so many others, I went along to the movie theatre to see the film, and I was immediately in love with the film because it was brilliantly funny, but clearly the writers of Ghostbusters demonstrated a real and genuine insight into the subject. This was no pastiche. It starts in a parapsychology department. It then shows the development of the investigation team. And yet, of course, it's a comedy, but there is real insight into the writing of that film. And immediately it had me enthralled. Its influence, Ghostbusters the movie, really didn't change for me very much about the way I proceeded, the way I carried out investigations. But what it did do is it allowed me to be more socially acceptable, to allow what I do to be more socially acceptable. Ghost hunting was always spoken about in hushed tones prior to the release of Ghostbusters. And of course, once it was released, pretty much everybody thought ghost busting was cool. The legacy of Ghostbusters, I think, is a very difficult thing to consider. I don't think 3 months goes past without me watching the film, being drawn to watch the film again. I know every line of the film. I've seen it countless hundreds of times down the years. And yet it remains as funny, it remains as relevant as it was 35 years ago. my son's called Oscar. My office is full of Ghostbusters paraphernalia. I have a Ghostbusters tattoo. I think the legacy of Ghostbusters will go with me literally to the grave. Lots of people identify with the different Ghostbuster characters. I think for me, one is a standout, and that's Egon. It's not quite true. I don't collect moulds, spores and fungi. I'm certainly not a fun guy. But he is the nerd. He is the science nerd. He is the geek. He's the level-headed, mostly level-headed, slightly socially awkward character. And I identify with him because I think if they were writing me into a movie, that would be the character that they would give me.
My name is Dr. Ciaran O'Keeffe. I'm Associate Head of School here at Buxton University, which means that I'm in charge of psychology, criminology, social science, sports, education, but also I'm a parapsychologist by background. I'd always been fascinated by ghost stories at a young age. I had read James Herbert, Clive Barker, but the classics, H.P. Lovecraft, etc. So I always had a fascination with ghosts, but at the age of 13, it was the movie Ghostbusters. That's what really got me involved in parapsychology and kind of kick-started a whole career in it. I was fascinated by Ghostbusters because it was a mix of entertainment and what appeared to be science. So even from the start, with the team wandering around the basement of the library with their gadgets, but also even interviewing the eyewitness as well, and then, cutting to the Xenocard test in the lab with Venkman. All of that was kind of felt sciencey. At the age of 13, I was like, oh, this is fascinating. But then there was the entertainment aspect. There was the laughs as Slimer appeared, and all the fun that the three of them and then the four of them had as Ghostbusters. It was just fascinating. And like I said, to have a fascination with ghost stories and then to see up on film people that looked like scientists throwing themselves into haunted environments, I genuinely at the age of 13 pointed at the screen and said, that's what I want to do. I wish the university gave us lots of money and not ask us to produce anything. That would be wonderful. But they have genuinely inspired me and still inspire me to the day. So I'm surrounded by the odd kind of symbol of Ghostbusters because it does remind me that there was a fascination there even about the fact that they were part of a university. So when I saw the film, literally the next week, I was on the phone to Columbia University. I had found a number for Columbia University, the psychology department at the time, spoke to a lady there, and she was obviously quite peed off at the fact that somebody else was calling about this silly film, even though it was some months after it had been released in the States, but still, she was quite peed off. But I think maybe the way that I was talking to her, and she could tell that I wasn't that old as well, she put me on to the Institute of Parapsychology, based in North Carolina. And it was even that conversation. So maybe if that conversation had gone slightly differently and she just put the phone down and that was it, that could have destroyed my boyhood dreams of being a Ghostbuster in a university. But actually for her to be a little bit more supportive and say to me, oh, there's this Institute of Parapsychology where it all started. You can imagine then I went off on a kind of a journey of researching parapsychology, looking at universities that study this sort of stuff. So, yeah, the university here doesn't pay me to do nothing. They keep me very, very busy. But luckily, I am part of a university that is actually open to the study of parapsychology. In day-to-day parapsychology, it's more akin to what Peter Venkman was doing in the lab. Although we don't use Xenocards anymore, we haven't used those for decades. in parapsychology, but it's more about running laboratory experiments to test different things. So from my perspective, I'm very interested in what we call fear correlates. So I'm interested in what is it specifically about haunted environments that causes the most fear. Is it the lighting level? Is it the architecture? Is it the condition of the building? Is it sounds in particular? Those sorts of things. Is it suggestion before you go into a building? But all of that is laboratory-based work. Merely because a lot of us have psychology backgrounds, so we're manipulating the variables and able to test kind of and see what the outcomes are. So it is very, very lab-based. But even that first witnessing of Peter Venkman in that lab as a 13-year-old is quite remarkable to think, you know, within a month of seeing that film, I knew what Zener cards were, of what some of the early J.B. Rhine studies were about in terms of using these cards, and I also had a sense of what psychology experiments were about. So my day-to-day stuff that I do in terms of research is exactly that. It's falling back onto those psychology and parapsychology experiments. Don't ask me that question. And the reason why is because I realised how old I was when I changed my thoughts about which one I wanted to be. I have always wanted to be Venkman, but at the age of around 40, and it was pretty much around the 40th birthday, midlife crisis, all of that sort of stuff, I still really wanted to be Venkman. I even, my first academic job, I had boots that looked like him, Docs, and I always kind of modelled myself thinking I'd be the cool Ghostbuster. Now, at the tender age of 48, I look back and I go, well, no, I am Spengler. I am the Ghostbuster that never cracks a smile, that is always thinking about the data and mold spores and fungus and all of that. And yeah, I think it would have to be Spengler and, of course, yeah, the actor Harold Ramis, classic.
So I'm Dr. Cal Cooper. I'm a psychologist and parapsychologist based here at the University of Northampton, and I'm the current module coordinator for our third year module Parapsychology and Anomalous Experiences, which is within our psychology curriculum. What we look at specifically within parapsychology is a kind of a wide spectrum of different things. We're really interested in what's called anomalistic psychology, so that is a discipline of parapsychology in a way where we are interested in people's beliefs in the paranormal and experiences, but how can science and conventional explanations seem to fit the bill? So why do things sometimes appear paranormal? One particular researcher was a guy called Charles Honiton, and he's most famous for kind of pioneering the Ganzfeld and other forms of sensory deprivation. And in these studies, essentially you are blocking people's ability to see. They have ping pong balls, half one shielded over the eyes, and you get this pink haze from a red light beaming down. Creates a nice field of vision. You're listening to static with a reduced hiss, which is called pink noise. And you're relaxing in a big leather chair. You've gone through a relaxation procedure to stretch your arms out, your legs out. And there could be a number of things. You could have someone in a different lab that's been given a random picture or a random video clip to look at, and they're trying to send it to you. Or it could be a remote viewing type experiment. So you're trying to see information in the real world at distance. All the Ganzfeld ones, they were successful. So it shows that if we alter someone's state of awareness, their conscious awareness, it seems we can tap into some of these sensory cues and bits of information that do seem to relate to targets, where when we've ruled out all the other explanations, that they seem to be gaining information in an anomalous process. When I teach the students parapsychology, there are loads of relevant examples I actually bring up. So when we get to the second term, we move away from looking at anomalous experiences in the real world. In the second term, we talk about the Rhine Revolution. So how Duke University had its own parapsychology laboratory due to the Rhines, and testing with Zener cards, so trying to have a structured methodology for testing for ESP. And there's a brilliant scene at the start of Ghostbusters where we see Dr. Peter Venkman testing two students, one he's flirting with and the other one he doesn't really care about, with a study that was actually published around 1950, 1952 in the Journal of Parapsychology regarding negative reinforcement on ESP ability. So I show that clip of him testing with the Xenocast to students and say, look, this is a gimmick and it's clearly a very fun scene, but this is how it was done. And when he says, look, don't worry, we only have 75 more to go, people did hundreds, if not thousands. It was very, very boring, but that's the way they were set up. My earliest memory of repeatedly seeing Ghostbusters was my mum had recorded Ghostbusters 2. And so as a kid, I loved this whole concept of people going out and collecting samples of things like that. I don't think I ever looked at it in the grand, because 5, 6, something like that, you're not looking at it in the grander scheme of a science. But I grew up in an area of Nottingham where it's reputed for various hauntings. Down the road from me even now is 5-10 minutes away, Newstead Abbey, the former home of Lord Byron. And my grandmother, who really got me into ghosts, told me all about the ghost stories there, and I read about them in local heritage books as well, written by Jane Peters, like the White Lady of Newstead Abbey. She'd been seen stood outside at the bus stop. Such an apparent, objective apparition, so physical, looking like an actual person. Numerous bus drivers had stopped for her, opened the door, and she disappeared. So I was watching Ghostbusters hand in hand with hearing about people's real-world claims of ghosts. The two didn't match up. In Ghostbusters, you've got these extravagant ghosts flying about in electric chairs or made of balls of slime and eating food and things like that. And yet in the real world, they're described as just other people or just having a sense of someone else there in the room. So that's my earliest memory. We've done that a few times here. Where sometimes there's been something happening in a local building that the university owns, or someone who's a member of staff that knows we've got a parapsychology department, and we've gone out and checked it out. Really unique situation though, because that means 5 or 6 parapsychologists have actually gone out. And when you hear of most modern day ghost hunting and investigations, it might be the odd psychical researcher or someone interested, but not a group of parapsychologists from a university. And so that kind of, to me, resonates with the library scene. At the start, you've got the 3 of them all going out because it seems to be, this is happening right now, we must go and check it out. Maybe it'd be Ray, I think. I mean, he seems like someone I really get along with. He's that dedicated researcher, he's got the heart, he's got the passion, the enthusiasm. He will fight back against, anyone trying to put him down. But I think I get on with all the Ghostbusters. Would that also include Lewis Tully as well? Could we put him in there? I mean, he'd be fun, bless him. He'd sort out tax returns and things like that and accounts. There we go. If we're getting grants, we could get Lewis involved and he could sort that out. I suppose I'm like any Ghostbusters fan. I'm not, I suppose, a hardcore one where I've got loads and loads of stuff. I've certainly kind of gone down that route of becoming a parapsychologist, and I appreciate the film and what support it gives, but now and then I keep finding things. So this National Trust recently, I found some of these books, Ghostbuster of the Year, The Real Ghostbusters, and I used to watch this, and it's great to even see now it's ending up on Netflix, some of the cartoons, and I just think it's great. I've watched some of them recently to kind of reminisce, and I think for the next generation, showing my kids and then beyond that other kids, look, Ghostbusters is great, not just the films. And now also with the 3rd film coming up as well, soon as well, fantastic. There's going to be this resurgence of more interest in this, and hopefully kids saying, well, that was the entertainment side and I loved it, but people say that they're actually having these experiences. Is that our next generation of some parapsychologists? Because we've even had people go through a whole psychology degree here just because they know we do parapsychology and they wanted to do that 3rd year module, do a dissertation on it, so they knew they got a recognised, accredited degree that involved parapsychology as well.